Good morning, Natchitoches. This is Joe. Joining Glenn Monsoor and I in the studio is U.S. Senator David Vitter. Senator, good morning, and thank you very much for coming by.
Good morning. Great to be here. Thank you all for the invite.
So we're glad that you're coming to Natchitoches, and as we mentioned before you came in, the fact that you're not up for re-election for quite some time, but you're already making a lot of rounds with the town hall meetings, that's very impressive. It goes kind of beyond the scope of just campaigning. It goes actually into delving into some issues.
Yeah, this isn't about campaigning. This is about doing my job. And, you know, when I first ran for the U.S. Senate, the very first commitment I made was to do at least one town hall meeting in every parish, every Congress. So that's 64 every Congress, 32 a year. And so I'm off and running doing that this year, even though I was just reelected. And so, like today, I'm going to be in Natchitoches and then Avoyelles Parish, later on in Jennings, tomorrow in New Iberia, and where else? Lafourche Parish. So I'm going to get around.
Well, you know, you did that the last 6 years.
Yep.
And everybody was thinking, well, he's doing that because Republicans are having a big fight. But that's what you promised 6.5 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, it's as simple as the fact that I promised to do it, to keep in touch, and so I did it. And it's a great way to keep in touch with everybody in all parts of the state.
All right, no more nice guy. Now we want to know if you're going to balance the budget.
All right, just to kind of jump into it.
Yeah, I'm going to fight like hell to try. I wish I had the magic wand so I could do it on my own, but that is the big issue that we're trying to deal with now. The Senate is on recess this week, no votes. We go back next Monday, and that is going to be before us front and center because we need to pass a new funding bill, some sort of new funding bill by March 3rd, which is obviously right around the corner. And I strongly support this idea that at a minimum we should go back to 2008 spending levels.
All right, and we've seen what's come out from the House as far as what they're looking to cut. What are some of the ideas that you have on places to cut to reduce spending in the government?
Well, first of all, I agree with their top line, and that is to go back to 2008 spending levels before the huge stimulus, the big increases in the Obama budgets. Now, that's, in my opinion, a pretty modest start. I mean, we're not talking about going back to 1970s spending levels. I mean, we're talking about 2 years ago. And so it is doable. It will take some work. It will take some sacrifice, but it is doable. And I think everything needs to be on the table, but I also think you would logically look at those agencies that got the dramatic increases in the last 2 years. And I'll give you one clear example. EPA's budget has gone up 29% in 2 years, 29%. So that's one place to start.
See, as a layman, Senator, to me that's logic. I mean, well, my family.
That's why I'm having trouble in Washington.
Right, I'm making a lot less than I was making in 2008.
Yeah.
I would love to go back to 2008 spending, right, but I've dropped below that. But you're just talking about taking all the increases from 2 years ago and let's start over.
Yeah.
That ought to be a simple thing, and nobody would get majorly hurt except maybe some new hires and stuff, but it's time for people to, step up and say it's time to get it done.
Yeah, I think it would be a meaningful but very reasonable start. Now, we need to go further, obviously, over time to get to a balanced budget. And so besides real meaningful cuts this year, the other thing I'm really pushing for is structural reform, a straitjacket, if you will, so that Congress has to stay on that path and get to a balanced budget in a reasonable period of time, something like a balanced budget constitutional amendment, which I strongly support.
Now, there are, again, we've seen a lot of what the Republicans are looking to cut, but there are some issues that, some things that have been historically protected, just one example being defense. Are you guys kind of looking at some of those other things to maybe reduce spending on at a later date?
Everything's on the table, and in fact, defense gets some cuts in the Republican cuts, not as much as an agency like EPA that's been increased 30% in 2 years, but everything is on the table. Everything has to be on the table.
And I'm sure there are. I read different articles and all about all the waste and unbelievable expenses of even the military, of Social Security. I honestly believe you could almost balance the budget by taking all the fraud out of Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid.
There's huge room for improvement there. We need to do a much better job. Things like excess property. You know, the federal government has all sorts of property which it owns, which it's not using, which is actually costing money to keep and maintain and cut the grass. We could save $8 billion pretty quickly just getting rid of that sort of excess property.
And it's taking tax money away from
Absolutely.
the states that property taxes.
Yeah.
Well, Senator, right now in the Senate, you're in a minority, and a lot of people leading up to this were saying how a Democratic Senate and a Republican House of Representatives were going to cause some sort of stalemate in Congress. What steps are you guys taking to try to get your policies passed, even though you're in the minority?
Well, of course, the House is leading the way. Obviously, conservatives are in the majority in the House, and including on this issue, they're leading the way by passing, I think, a reasonable proposal. And so it'll come over to the Senate as soon as we're back in session next Monday, and we're going to take that up, and conservatives like me will fight for that same top-line figure. I mean, we can argue about moving things around, but I believe it should be the same top-line figure with those meaningful sort of cuts.
Do you see any Democrats kind of wavering? Because right now, for a long time it's looked very partisan. But do you kind of see any Democrats wavering on some of these issues?
Absolutely, and I'll tell you which ones they are. They just happen to be the ones that are up for re-election in 2 years. Funny how that can get some folks' attention. But if you look at the Democratic senators who will be up for re-election in 2012, particularly from states that aren't clearly liberal states, they are very nervous about sticking with the president's agenda, and they are very cognizant of the need to be more fiscally responsible.
All right, if you wouldn't vote for it during an election year, don't vote for it in a non-election year. You know,
right. That's exactly right.
I have a serious problem with, and I think there's going to be some Republicans maybe kind of sway too on this other fashion. But if we block the federal government and shut it down because the Democrats will not pass a bill that the House can confer with in time to get this done, it's not a major horrible thing like people think. Nothing's going to really crush down and fall.
Well, yeah,
But
let me say
it's
a
more of
couple
a blame
things.
game now.
Yeah, first of all, nobody wants a government shutdown, and certainly Republicans, whether it's John Boehner or me or anybody else, we're not pushing for, we don't want a government shutdown. What we do want is to change business as usual and get spending under control, because unless we start doing that right now, we're going to face a crisis. Secondly, it takes two to tango, and it takes two to shut down the government. So if that happens, and I hope it doesn't, it's going to be because Democrats and the president created that situation as well. So that's number two. But hopefully, all the sides will be reasonable and come together and start attacking this problem, which I think is the biggest domestic challenge we face.